This is Chain of Thoughts, an original podcast by Arionkoder that covers the latest trends in product and AI. In Chain of Thoughts, every show is an element of a chain, connecting product with AI and AI with product. From understanding a brand new machine learning technology to covering the newest experiences around product and design, Chain of Thoughts keeps the chain growing with the thing that we value the most, our thoughts. Chain of Thoughts is an original production by Arionkoder, a product design and development company based in Boston, Massachusetts, that delivers specialized services around engineering, product, and AI.
In today's episode of Chain of Thoughts, we will talk about how the latest AI developments are calling for a redefinition of product design principles. Do standard design sprints hold in this new landscape? How do product designers and AI experts interact with one another to discover ML opportunities? What are the most common challenges when interacting with users and customers with no experience in AI? What about UX in this context? Make sure you listen all the way through to not miss a single point about this. All right, welcome to today's episode of Chain of Thoughts. I'm laughing because we always do like a clack at the very beginning, and it's a funny thing. So thanks again for being here, Pico Calde. How are you doing? Say something. Come on.
Great. Glad to be together again. Recording, yeah, it's always the funny part to start recording the episode. So glad to get time to discuss
Yeah.
again.
What about you?
Yeah, I don't think the clock thing is needed anymore. It's like something from the past. And you have to coordinate audio, video, and it was just for that. Uh, but yeah, I think it's funny to do it like
Yeah.
start, right? It's a fun thing. I'm pretty good. It's Friday. We're recording on a Friday. I don't know. Maybe you're listening Monday and Thursday, and that's really bad for you and good for us.
TGIF. But well, today we are going to talk about one of our latest obsessions, I would say. So I think that this episode is going to be one of the funny ones, and we will intervene all the time. So probably you will see that we will overlap one another. But today's goal is to talk or to understand product design in the context of AI applications. This is something that we do a lot in Arioncoder and that we have put our minds on for a long time, how we can improve product design in the context of implementing AI. You know, when we talk about implementing AI, we are talking about implementing something that is slightly different than traditional software. In some cases, in some other cases, is completely different. So all these product design principles that both Vico and Calde know a lot, and that I'm learning in these conversations, sometimes don't hold 100%. So I think that this is one of these episodes in which we will talk about those experimental things that we are thinking about, and it's going to be one of the good ones. So I would like to start with a question. It's an open question. I want to understand what's your point about the existing design sprints in the context of AI based products. Whoever wants to go first, feel free.
I can start maybe with a little of roads, and then we can go to thorns maybe to go on the 2 points. Because you mentioned how they do not hold basically, and that implies the our basic understanding of that we start from the premise that they need to be adapted, and that's already a value appreciation of the process itself, right? And stemming from that question, I do want to go through the rows in the sense that uh, not design sprints per se, but design thinking process and the stages it proposes do still stand valid in a sense. And why do they still stand valid, though we won't apply the same frameworks in each step as we would do for regular, I don't know, mobile app development, because we need to consider the intrinsicies of what it is to build an AI solution that requires specific frameworks. But we always do start by the initial basic steps. And that is, we always need to start by understanding and then that empathizing of stage the design thinking proposes. It's really linked to the hypothesis stages when we're thinking about the AI and ML solutions. So in that sense, I wanted to bring this thorn thing that if we abstract high enough the stages of what design thinking proposes, emphasizing, defining, ideating, prototyping, and testing, we will go through each one of those. But we cannot try to push the same frameworks we use normally for a regular software um, design and development process because we have to take into consideration, for example, when we are on the define stage, the data insights and exploration, for example. So we need to go adapting and understanding what are the frameworks that we need to add, and what are the questions that we need to incorporate, and how we do incorporate also the scientists in that collaboration with our design teams. And that's, I think, where it's the interesting also challenge and how we continue to adapt and push
Yeah,
forward.
it's a
I know Kali has a lot of
yeah. Let me just
thoughts.
say something. Yes, you're totally right, because in the end, if we talk about AI based software, we are still talking about software in the end. And we have to implement the software. If it's a mobile app, we still need to sketch the different um, views that we will have on the different screens and that stuff. So of course these processes still hold. But to your point, it's really necessary to find out which specific parts of this design process are affected by the fact that we are thinking about AI components. So yeah, I totally agree. Sorry, Calde, you wanted to say something?
No, yeah, and I think also it's a matter of attitude towards something new that is this new material that is AI, like artificial intelligence, how you can incorporate it into product design. Because I think something that happens is that it just like the start of different departments and they work in silos, right? The AI team is designing the model and the product design team is designing the application and they kind of interact, but in a way that is each one is doing like their thing, right? And they don't talk a lot. And in the best cases, there is some conversation and some alignment, but um, I think product designers and product managers and UX designers needs to start considering this AI thing as a new material that they can incorporate into traditional processes, right? And that does changes the process. It will be like small changes, but at least like instead of just thinking in building the wrapper, the wrapper experience towards the AI, you can start thinking about the full experience, right? The experience from the user and how it interacts with the model, not only with the application that interfaces the model. And there is something really interesting when you start doing that because you get into the details of how the model works. And then you have to start to learn about the basic concepts of AI. It's like it's something new, so there is inertia. There are like fears maybe to incorporate that, but it's something that we can do with ease. It's like I think a good part of designing the way a model interacts with users has to do with workflows and with feedback loops and with things that we already know from our process.
Yeah, and yeah, you mentioned something that is also kind of my obsession for the last few months, which is that there's like a problem in it's like a chicken and egg situation where we because when we think about designing an AI based product, uh, we usually say, all right, don't focus on the UI, don't focus on the user experience whatsoever, because you first need to verify if the AI components are feasible or not. If you're asking me to develop a tool that helps oncologists to cure cancer, but you rely on an AI model that needs to determine the exact drug for a specific type of tumor, that's challenging. And I first need to verify if building that model is feasible or not. So why designing the screens if I don't have the AI model done before? But on the other hand, all the process of designing the application already gives you an idea about the AI models that you will need. So where to start? It's kind of like the difficult part. So I guess that in this particular context, it's fundamental to produce a good interaction between the product designers and the AI people, right? That's kind of the fundamental piece that we need to add to the existing design sprints, right? AI experts that can collaborate in identifying the AI opportunities, right, Calde?
Right. And I want to get back a moment to what Pico said about understanding. It all starts with understanding. I mean, there's like a maybe like a chicken or egg situation, but like where to start um, in terms of what to do first. If you go first to the UI or if you go first to the feasibility of the model. But before that, you need to understand the workflows of users. And maybe in that sense, you can also like explore compromises, right? Like in the example that you were giving, like maybe the tool doesn't like provide the precise medication that needs to be used to address some kind of cancer. But there can be like suggestions in the middle and feedback loops from the users that guides the user toward like selecting the best medication. So in that sense, you will start to think of the interaction between the human and the model as something that happens through time and through several steps rather than some kind of simple input that returns a single outcome that needs to be the best possible outcome. So there is the need for that in some sense, but it can be something that is built together between the human and the model, right? And I'm talking, of course, about automation versus augmentation. That is something that we have been like already like talking about. I have an article published about that and for how it applies to healthcare. It's in Arionkoder's blog, but essentially it has to do with that, right? Like instead of just thinking of the model as something that will automate a full series of tasks, you can get into the task, learn what are the steps that a user normally follows, and create several artifacts that interact with the model or that has like their own model in a way that allows the user to get to something better and empowers him, right? Question. I'm not sure
I
if
think,
I answered your question. Yeah, but I think but I related. Yeah, but I think
Yeah,
but you
I
have
think
to
that you
start.
answered.
But you have
Yeah,
to
sorry, go
start.
ahead.
That is not going to happen in this episode all the time. Sorry about that. We're going to be like
Sorry about that. We're going to
jumping
be
all the
like
time.
jumping
Do
all
you
the
want to
time.
comment something much about that?
Do you want to comment something much about
Bring
that?
something.
No,
No, I
I,
want
I,
to bring
I,
something.
I was going to say that yes, that answered my question, and but at the same time, I think that by understanding the user journey right from the very beginning, you can also figure out which are the data sources that you might have or that you might produce along the way. Because, for instance, if you think about this process about these straw man oncologist that we are talking about now, and you say, all right, usually the process starts like this. We first do a literature review. Okay, then which data sources you use for literature review? Well, I use PubMed, I use bioRxiv, I use these repositories. All right, I already have an idea about the data sources that you want to exploit, and that already connects me with an a potential AI solution to that, which will be to maybe do retrieval augmented generation on these repositories or implement solutions like that. Uh, from your face, Biko, I have the feeling that you were going to say exactly that. So that's already happening, or
I was thinking about something really connected actually, because I'm really glad to kind of brought back augmentation versus automation because it's critical part of the decisions on the understanding phase. And you would understand it for the type of task and what implies for the user. Also, there's a decision there, not only from a machine learning and technical perspective, but is this a task the user actually likes and enjoys doing? Or is something that they will prefer to avoid doing? And there's something there also to take in consideration when you are understanding the problem itself that would lead also, or let's call it, will be an additional data point for the decision that the team will finally take. And you may remember now an additional one that I think we might somehow, I don't know if we commented it in a previous episode, but um, the other decision you will have afterwards will be, okay, are we going to go for, I'm not so technical, so you have to correct me here, but it was recall when you are deciding. So it would change that. If you're designing a solution here, the experience design will change completely on the type of reward function you decide. Basically, the experience for the user that you will have to design will change. So these are like technical decisions also that afterwards are the problem of the whole team, UI and UX designers, product managers, and the technical team, because it feeds and changes and transform how the user will interact with these and what you're expecting also to get as feedback loops for the ML model. So I think it's really interesting in that initial phase of understanding the amount of decisions are being done with these two perspectives. What does the model need and what does the user need? Because you have an additional need actually that steams. A model needs certain things to be able to be created. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, when you analyze the user journey, you you come up with models basically that you will need, that you will first, you first come up with a hypothesis that you need to verify with the AI models, let's say, because we first need to confirm that all these AI components that we are imagining together with the user are feasible or not. We discover the data sources, as we mentioned before, that might or might not be associated with each of these components. But your point is also important. We even put design constraints to the AI models themselves. So, for instance, if my plan is to do a screening of a disease, all the examples will be related with healthcare, but because that's my field of expertise. But if you think about screening, for instance, you want to reduce the amount of false negatives, because if you're screening for a very dangerous disease, if you miss one of the positive cases, then that people is at risk. So that kind of design principles, let's say, or design constraints for the AI models are basically detected at this point of the design process. Otherwise, the issue will be that we will end up inventing a solution that for a problem that doesn't exist. So it's a very important point.
Yes, and something extra that happens is that I think that in reality, the processes for designing a model and the processes for designing a product have a lot in common. It's not like like there are like departments working in silos, but in reality, they're like kind of doing the same because we start by understanding the problem and like laying out an idea of how to solve that. And we build something that is like a proof concept in the case of machine learning and a prototype in the case of product design. And we try it against reality, trying to get to some KPIs in the terms of product design. It always has to do with increasing the productivity of the application or how the user works with it, but it has to do with adapting to the real scenarios of users and their needs and goals. And in the case of models, you're looking also to get to a number, like an improvement in the number. And if you fail with that, you go back and you work again in the model design. It's the same that we do with product design. If we fail with a prototype, we go back to our designs desktops and we try a new prototype and we advance in that sense. So it's an iterative process that is has a lot of similarities and that can be like connected and can have like a conversation through it.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned that, you're totally right. I mean, when I started to be involved in product related projects, and I started to see all these processes that are related with product, I found out that there were common denominators with how we do AI in the academia, for instance, and how it's done for POCs. So it's not very difficult to involve AI experts in the design process in the end, because it's just a matter of connecting the dots and finding out the similarities between both processes, and then just try to augment one another with what is the best from one side and the other. For instance, this thing that you guys mentioned before about the feedback loops, it's also one of our latest obsessions with these people here, thinking about the short feedback loops and the long feedback loops. When we talk about AI based solutions, we always collect data, right? Not just for the purpose of um, understanding if the results of the algorithm still hold and to detect data drift problems and things like that, but also to improve the model through time and to fine tune the models and to make them better. And that's a fundamental feedback loop that we always have to take into account. But
Yes, sorry to interrupt you, right? But I'm not sure if, for example, listeners to this podcast come from product design are aware of what short feedback loops and long feedback loops mean. So maybe we can describe them. Can you, like, naturally?
okay, I will do my best. I feel now like in an oral exam. But yeah, when we talk about long feedback loops, we are talking about we have a task that we want to perform. We don't want to automate the task because maybe we are augmenting the process of doing that task with AI so that we can achieve it. So we have a goal and we want to achieve it. And we follow a series of steps that can be either automated or be done manually. And in the end, we get a result. What's our final goal? To make this process as efficient as possible. So one feedback loop is a long feedback loop is when we try to reduce the amount of time or the amount of interactions that we need to go from the input to the expected output. That's a long feedback loop. When we talk about short feedback loops, we are talking about all these human interventions that we do along the process to make sure that we come up with a good solution. So, for example, if we are writing a piece of text and we ask an AI model to highlight the most important parts of it, and then we correct that output of the model, then we want to collect that data because in the end, we want to improve this short feedback loop with a final goal, which is improve the long feedback loop as well. Um, so I don't know if it's clear enough.
Right, and we need to display. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty clear. And in the last case, in the case of short feedback loops, we try to display like a quick reaction to users, the system reacts accordingly to what the user asks for in real time. Right, that would be like the experience that users will have with short feedback loops, and that informs the system in a way that is uh, making a loop quickly. So that's why short feedback loops. So I think that's important too, right? Because they're like feeding the model, but also they have to the need for a manifestation in the experience of the user, right? And in that sense, in the interfaces, there can be graphical interfaces or maybe instructional interfaces or just text, plain text.
that we are used to do with prompts.
Pico, you want to say something?
I was just really thinking that I don't really want to miss your reflection. I was left there thinking on how you brought your personal experience of like contrasting the process of academia, basic process of creating POC for paper even, and the process of design process. And I was like, I really wanted to emphasize that I think that's the power of a designed led approach. So we all use these type of processes, be it in when you're trying to do is write a paper or even your thesis when you are trying to get your degrees. Even designers, not on digital space but also on physical space, when we go to the basics of the process, it all steals down to the same, right? You start by understanding, and you may change different tools used in that toolkit for understanding. You won't understand the same way for paper or for building a house or a digital solution. But I think that it's the power of when we understand that design is also with mindset, and especially if we're thinking about human-centered design. So I really didn't want to lose the chance to like emphasize that. And I think our passion for human-centered design is also what has led us to like, okay, let's reflect double on this and how we can empower each stage and how we bring the best that you have learned throughout your processes in academia and in building POCs to interact in the best way of designing solutions for users. So I think it's a little.
No, it's nice to reflect on that point in particular because one thing that we do in academia and that is also done in design processes is experimenting as fast as possible. We first need to come up with a quick solution, try it, and then improve over that solution that we have developed. And usually, one of the things that I try to do when we run a design workshop, for instance, with our customers and do things like that, is trying to figure out how to solve the different tasks or the different problems that are being presented. So it's kind of a solutioning thing that we do in the background, but because we need to have a clear idea about the feasibility of something, so we need to at least design a very stupid solution at the very beginning to know how far we are from the final solution that we might need. And um, and that solutioning thing, it's kind of tricky because you need to, let's say, hide that to the users because they don't want to know the details about what you are doing in the background. uh, but at the same time, some of the things that you're doing in the background will affect the next questions that you will ask the users, because it might be that you say, hey, I will go for a deep learning solution that needs a lot of data, and then when I talk with the user, I learned that this data is not available or it's kind of difficult to be collected. So then I have to go back to the solution that I had in mind and I have to redesign it. So it's tricky as well because we need to start to design the solution without implementing it because we are still in a discovery phase, let's say. But at the same time, and that solution is being constrained by the environment, but at the same time we know that the solution that we develop will end up probably constraining the user journey as well. So it's, again, chicken or egg. It's the same situation.
Yes, I'm wondering about the times for experimentation, and maybe there is a difference there, right? Like the time that you need for experimentation in terms of machine learning model differs from the times that we need for experimentation in product design. I mean, it seems that product design goes faster in that sense, like you can like build something and validate it faster. In some experiences, you can like do it or build like a quick proof of concept that allows you to try something, make an experiment, learn from it, and iterate at the same time. But in some other cases, of course, there will be like a need for time in the middle, like for experimenting with AI. So, what do you think, Nacho?
Um, I think that the time always, I always say the same. It really depends on the problem. I always close the discussion saying that it always depends on the data or the problem. But yeah, to your point, Calde, I think that the most tricky part is that, for instance, you can mock up an app relatively easy right now because we have lots of tools and we can even use AI for doing that. So that design experimentation is relatively fast to be done. The AI part is also quite fast right now, let's say, but it really depends on the problem because, for instance, if you're focusing on a text-based application, you probably won't need to train your own model. It's just a matter of paying OpenAI for opening for this open API, and then write the right prompts to do the solution, to implement the solution, give it a try. Maybe you can get a glimpse if how far you are from the final solution, because for instance we have done that in the past. We have implemented prompt based solutions that are far from perfect but already have some insights about how feasible this task is. And then there's another layer of experimentation as well that needs to be integrated here, which is all right, I can give it a try. I can implement these POCs in a relatively short time now that I'm using LLMs, but I also need to put those models in the hands of the users as fast as possible too, because I want to get feedback from them. I want to understand whether this solution that might be good or not, in my opinion, is good or not for the user in particular. And for that, we already have tools as well. We have things like Streamlit, for instance, a Python library that allows you, without little to no insights about how to do UI design, to come up with a straightforward interface that you can interact with and that you can use to try the models. And that's actually something that we do a lot in Arionkoder. So when a customer comes and wants a POC, we usually go that way. We design a pretty basic user interface using Streamlit, and we connect the algorithms from there so that they can interact and and declare themselves victorious or ask us for something else.
You're telling our biggest secret here, our secret sauce.
Yeah,
No, yeah, it's like something that we are using more and more, right? These POCs for trying something and validate it before moving forward. And as always in software, I think that's part of fast iteration, fast validation, and failing fast, right? And discovering the actual problem that you have to solve through creating something and trying it against.
yeah. Um, I think that we are running out of time, but I would like to add a few more things as well, and maybe we can discuss that later on in future show. But this particular thing about failing fast, I think, is super important in the context of AI. Probably is more it is more important than in the context of traditional software, because in traditional software you can fail if you misscoped. I don't know if that word exists, but if you missed the actual scope of the solution that you want to implement, and then you fail and you redesign, and at some point you will converge. But in AI, when it comes to AI, we are talking about an experimental technology. It's something that requires a scientific approach. To Vico's point, we need to frame the hypothesis. We need to give it a try with a few solutions. We need to measure how effective those different solutions were. We need to present those numbers to the customer so that he or she can say, this is okay, this is not. And then once we declare ourselves victorious or not, then we can move forward to the other part, which is also a funny part, and it's one of my favorite parts, because when you start interacting with the user, you start learning about some other challenges that might appear, and the product ends up becoming like an infinite growing thing that keeps incorporating more and more features and solves more and more issues. And maybe it's completely different at some point from what you had in mind at the very beginning, but it's valuable to your users, which is the end goal, right?
Yeah, we're laughing with Vico because I'm pretty sure we need a button that you hit it and it says, "Product is never
Product's
done."
never
Like,
done.
yeah, product is never done.
Product's never done, and I was going to
We can
say
do
that
it. Maybe, yeah, maybe we
this
can do it.
episode
Like
can never be
recommend, like,
done.
Product is
We should have like like here, products never done, 100%. I was sure 100% you were coming from there, Kelly, and probably
yeah,
this episode could also be never be done
100%.
if we wanted. But I
Let's try
love
it. I will say, let's do this. I count to three, and then the three of us just like scream, like, "Bro, this never done."
it.
What do you think?
yeah, let's
Yeah,
do it.
one, two,
Product is
three.
never done.
One, two, three.
No,
It's
it's
terrible.
empty.
It's terrible.
We can
It's a
coordinate
terrible
looking at
idea.
this. Yeah, this is for the cats. Yeah, yeah. No, we are
I
terrible at
think that's
this.
our cue to
Yeah,
finish the episode. So thank you very much, guys, for being here today, and thank you to the audience. If you made to this point, that means that you've listened to our episode all the way to the end. So that's we really appreciate that. We have covered in this particular show some of our latest obsessions around product design. So thank you for being here. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or comment in the box below if you're watching us on YouTube. And remember that Chain of Thoughts seeks to build a community of product designers, developers, and AI experts to keep creating great digital tools for customers and users. So to keep this community growing, please like, follow, and subscribe to Chain of Thoughts, both in Spotify and YouTube, and of course in Apple Podcasts as well. And share with your own followers using the hashtag Chain of Thoughts Podcast on X and LinkedIn. You can also follow Arionkoder on these social media platforms to keep yourself updated about the show and our actions as a company. And see you soon for the next piece of the chain.
See you soon. Thank
thank
you.
you very much.